Yeah, well, one of the things I love about what we do is it's not just the mechanisms, it's the community. It's the generous community that we build.
Hello, so glad that you have tuned in. I am Kim Moeller, your host of this Generous Girl podcast, a podcast all about generosity and how it is interwoven in 5 areas: faith, family, fitness, finance, and friendships. You are going to be so happy that you tuned in today to hear our amazing guest, Valerie Hogan. She has a wealth of knowledge, experience, and degrees, and she will definitely motivate you to want to take the next step in 2024. Thanks for joining. Hi, welcome back to the Generous Girl podcast. And we have a fantastic guest today named Valerie Hogan. I know you are just going to be so happy that you tuned in. Valerie loves to assist people in overcoming financial obstacles so that they can gain greater personal freedom and a deeper walk of generosity. She joined the NCF Chicago office as a relationship manager in 2019 and is currently the executive director at Orchard Ministry Development, OMD, where she assists donors with non-cash and legacy gifts. Valerie and her mom, Miriam Neff, are co-founders of the Widow Connection and can be heard on their radio feature called Starting Over Financially nationwide on Christian stations, where they assist widows in preventing fraud and learning valuable budgeting and financial management skills. Previously an attorney with the Christian Law Association, she holds a law license and her certified financial planner certification. Since 2000, Valerie has served at her church, leading groups and individuals toward good stewardship with Christian financial concepts, Crown Financial, and then Financial Peace University. She's the daughter of Bob and Miriam Neff and married to Mark Hogan and has 3 sons, Edward, Albert, and Edmund. And Mark and Valerie attend the Orchard Evangelical Free Church and are foster and adoptive parents. They're both passionate about including the local church, excellence in stewardship, foster and adoption related ministries, and justice related to widows and orphans. She also holds a BS in biology with a minor in chemistry from Liberty University, a JD degree from Concord Law School at Purdue University, and the Certified Financial Planner designation. So she's also a licensed attorney and registered patent attorney. So welcome, Valerie.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you,
You
Kim.
too. Such the background in the bio, and I'm always so humbled to even get to interview guests like you.
Oh my goodness, I'm humbled to be here. It's a
Oh,
wonderful time.
it's great. It's so great to have you. And I just think that you're really going to be able to touch on the pillar of finances, because we do talk about our 5 pillars and finances. And I'm thinking also, friendships, because of the community that you build for the women in Chicago and even in your role, in other places that affects outside of Chicago for women. So I love that this recording is going to be broadcast, and people are hearing it now in the beginning part of 2024, because I think you're listening to you. The listener will find really practical tips on how to be a wise financial steward of the resources that God has entrusted her with. So why don't we get started with, we always hear, before we go into your background, we always hear this phrase, the great wealth transfer. And I know you have a lot of passion about this topic and statistics. So let's just start with you explaining for the women what that is and why that's so significant.
Yeah. Well, depending on any given day where markets are at, right, and how much wealth, so you'll hear it's this trillion or that trillion. But basically, what we're seeing right now is women are holding about a half of wealth in the United States. And that number is going to move to over a half in the next 10 years. And so the numbers move again, it's this trillion or that trillion based on markets. And of course, we know COVID hit women and their earnings pretty hard, and maybe all of our earnings pretty hard, or investments. But nevertheless, that train is moving. And it used to be people would say, we're saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. No, it's here. We're seeing it day after day. I just had 2 close friends where their husbands passed in the last month, month and a half, both under 60,
Wow.
these gentlemen.
So sorry.
Yeah, this is happening now. And my mom has a widow's ministry. And so this is happening right now. So some of us, it's hard to, of a certain vintage where I recall that women did not hold most of the wealth. They didn't even have STEM when I started that
Right.
science, technology, engineering, and math. That was not a thing even when I was in school. So women were really not at the forefront of things like technology, finance, and that is just rolling forward very quickly. And so I can remember where it was just hard to wrap my mind around. Even we'd hear statistics in the last 10 to 15 years that women are, control a lot of the household finance. We think, oh yeah, of course, they go to the grocery, they go shopping. Well, I was explaining this to a friend of mine when we were downtown Chicago, and I said, when we talk about the great wealth transfer, I don't mean they're spending the grocery money.
Mm-hmm.
See all these big buildings around us? They're owning those, and they're owning over half.
Yeah.
And so, just to wrap our
Right.
mind around what that means, it's just I believe it's God saying, for whatever reason, we are up to bat, ladies.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so this is a really important time for us.
So well said and so exciting, because I feel like we go into each year and I try to have a phrase, last year it was abundance and this year it's gratitude that I just pray, okay, Lord, what is the one word that you want me to use or kind of camp on? And when I think of gratitude, then I try to be more intentional and to
Mhm.
either write it down in my journal or to say it or to pray it and then it calls to mind just all that God has blessed me with and others I know with. But then the bigger question of, okay, what do you want me to do with that? And
Yeah.
I'm talking not just financial resources by any means, but relationships, just relational capital or just
Yes.
time and all the things that he gives us. So I think that you're right, and I think when we look at like women being up to bat, that you think of a batter, right? You think of like say the World Series, and those people have to be in shape. Like they need to be ready to go, ready to hit, ready to catch, and be top of their game kind of thing. And I think each of us in the sphere that we live in as women, we have the goal of being top of our game, and that can look so different for each woman because her family is unique, her gift set's unique, her calling's unique.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about, like, you have quite the background. I love the blend of law and finances. Share how you got to where you are. What helped you make the decisions to be a lawyer as well as now working in for NCF.
Yeah, well, I would say it was a very serendipitous journey, except for I know it's not serendipity, right? It's God's hand and He's weaving.
Right.
And I would say that my quilt of life would have appeared very random to others and to me at many times. So when I was in undergrad, I had thought that maybe I would be a doctor or lawyer, and I
Mhm.
wasn't sure. So that was my science undergrad. Then I went to work for a large Fortune 100 company for a while. Met my husband, got married. We were both, I would call it, what did they used to call it? Yuppies, double income, no kids. So we were
Yes.
living the life. And God moved us right along into adopting three boys out of foster care. And they were a little older, 6, 7, and
Wow.
8, within 1 year,
Mm.
three boys
Wow.
from two different families. So, I mean, that's not really a linear career progression, let's say. So, I had an
Right.
early retirement, first retirement from my career in my early 30s. Then I stayed home for a little bit with my sons, and then went back to law school part time. And so I was in law school with them when they were in grade school. So interesting, they're reading their Curious George, and I'm reading a felony murder case next to them. So um, again, I'm like, I don't know what you're doing, Lord. But so after that, because I had the science undergrad, then came the patent test. And I did think that I was on my licensure is out of California. So I thought I might be heading your direction actually to become an attorney after that time. I did serve with Christian Law Association and helped with religious liberties and civil liberties defense for part
Mhm.
time while I was in this process. So I thought I was going to end up in California as an attorney, and the Lord really just redirected. I was facilitating a financial peace course at our um, church, and my husband and I, all along, I did not have a finance undergrad. And he's just quite skilled in that area. He's an IT guy. He loves some spreadsheets. So we had done that area of service all along with budget coaching and
Uh-huh.
benevolence coaching. So I was serving in one of those, and a lady approached me and said, "Our church, we had tried for a foundation, but we'd really like to do a planned giving department, like a hospital or university had." And my husband and I prayed about it and thought about it, and we had one plan, and God's like, "Oh, that's so cute. Anywho, I'd like you to do that." So that's how I started in this area. And I found that so planned giving is, all focused on helping people understand how to give things that are not cash. They don't fit in the offering basket, right? Maybe real estate, stocks,
Give an
things like that.
example, like, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
It could be things like stock, if they bought a stock of a common company like an Apple or a Google stock and that grew, they could donate that kind of thing. And this is going to sound very familiar to you because we live in this world and work in this world, right, Kim? So, um,
Sure.
or things like real estate, that kind of thing. So I was doing that with my church. And then I thought,
Right.
well, I don't have a finance undergrad. So also helping folks understand that they can give kind of the now and later through their will and trust. We're not taking anything with us, so they can give
Mhm.
later too. In that, I went for the CFP because I realized I don't have the finance undergrad, so I don't really think I should just Google some of this information. I think I need to fill in the financial piece. So that's where I picked up that credential. And I am definitely a nerd for Jesus. So I keep on studying and getting certifications about things I'm curious about. So that's
You're a
how I landed
learner.
there.
You're definitely,
Yeah. And I think
and that's how you
that's
landed
great.
it in. Yeah.
That's how I landed. Yeah, I pitched a joint event, and then they pitched to me, "Hey, how about come do this for us?" And as you know, we do those same things nationwide, and my area it's Chicagoland, but teaching folks about donating things that do not fit in the offering basket, right? And in various
Oh,
complex ways.
no, that's beautiful, Valerie. And that is part of the purpose of this podcast is helping women understand the bigger picture of generosity. Obviously it's called The Generous Girl, and a lot of us give from our cash, which is often
Mhm.
only 10%, right, of our overall pie. A lot of us have the 90% in the non-cash assets category. And I think it's easy to find a financial advisor who helps you but doesn't understand the bigger picture of generosity and what it means to even give these non-cash assets or give from appreciated securities. So if you are listening and that sounds foreign,
Right.
then I would recommend that you contact your financial advisor and ask more questions. So anyways, that is very helpful, and I'm glad that you shared that. When you mentioned the ministry with your mom and the widows,
Yes.
can you speak a
Yes.
little bit more about that?
Sure. This was interesting the way this morphed. So, through this and having the law degree and then the CFP designation, my mom has a counseling background, and my dad passed about 17 years ago from ALS. And she is also a learner.
Oh,
In fact, I picked up that chip from both parents, I think, probably. So,
oh,
she would describe herself as maybe a little old vintage lady, but she's a Phi Beta Kappa out of Northwestern University, and she's secretly a force to be
of
reckoned
course she
with.
is.
So, yeah. Um,
She's your
so
mom.
she started. She
Oh,
is. She is, and she started the ministry because she very quickly found herself thrown into things that she just was not expecting, and did not like to feel the way she felt insecure. She's always been a very bold, robust woman. Friends like to say she has
mm-hmm.
no fear chip. So she educated herself and just was looking for resources and wasn't finding what she was looking for. So she felt God calling on her heart to start something. So she started this widow connection ministry. And then eventually, I think we've all kind of encountered with friends or even our own relatives, when there's a major event that's traumatic, right on the heels of grief, there's often financial issues, right? Either, well,
Yes.
many women are worse off after an event like that, a divorce or becoming a widow, but many also have quite a bit of resources and now they're alone and going to steward that. So my mom would kind of
Yes.
over the backyard fence say, "Hey, Val, I feel like this woman widow is somebody's trying to defraud her. What do you think of this?" Or they're trying to sell her this product. Do you think that's
That
a
she
good
doesn't
idea?
need.
And yeah, and so many. I mean, we have hundreds, and my mom has spoken with thousands of widows now. She responds to every email sent into her, and we were finding there were frequently asked questions, and so folks told us make a series of videos, so we did, which became a 1 minute radio feature, which was starting over financially. Then the book came out from those two things called Wise Women Managing Money, and then the radio feature became Wise Women Managing Money, because that morphed into the information we were putting out for widows. Other single women were coming saying, "Well, I'm divorced, and he also did the finances, so I don't really have confidence about that." Or, single women getting started in their career were saying, "Well, I also don't have any starting point. My parents, they did the best they could, but maybe I didn't get training on this kind of thing." And so we found kind of this broad swath of women that were really curious and
Yeah.
wanting to learn this information.
That's so beautiful. And I love just the intentionality on your mom's side of things too. I always think about Rick Warren at Saddleback and his phrase, when hardship hits you, does it make you better or bitter? And it's such a choice, it's such a fork in the road. And obviously your mom, through the tragedy of losing her husband, decided to allow that to make her better and help others, and the joy that comes in giving her a purpose. And I know you mentioned that before we did the recording that your 2-word purpose statement from the Women Doing Well program is igniting boldness. And I see that in your mom also, that thread of, giving that woman who is the widow or the single or the married person who has no knowledge, and should her husband, get hit by a bus tomorrow, the igniting that boldness, that it's in there. And you're so smart. I just want to say to the listener, you are smart. It doesn't matter about your degree background. So many things are learnable today, and the information we have is just really at our fingertips. But it does involve, I think, like an intentionality on each of our parts as we go into this new year, and we say, okay, if we think of a continuum of knowledge and feeling empowered, where each listener reflect and look and say, where am I? Am I at point A, or am I closer to point Z? And then figure out, wherever you are on that continuum, what next steps do you want to take to move further down, so that when you finish 2024, and hopefully, you're hearing more of these incredible, amazing guests on the Generous Girl podcast that are inspiring you to, take that next step. Hopefully you can finish 2024 and say, wow, I've definitely moved further. I have more knowledge, or I decided to, hire a certified financial planner, or an investment advisor, or an estate attorney. I decided to put my property, or, my bank account into my trust, like all these practical steps. So if we dial it back a bit for the listener, can you identify, a few of those practical steps that you would say, okay, I would for sure make sure that you've done these items? What would those be?
Well, we like to say, and your previous guest, Janice, that's a good podcast to listen
Yes.
to, because she gave a whole lot of tips that I agree with wholeheartedly. One is just getting your arms around where you're at. And not to generalize, because there are women that are in private equity, there are
Yeah.
CPAs, there are heads of law firms, there are women that have certain pieces of this on lockdown. But I would
Yes.
encourage all women listening. I have never met anybody in this industry, man or woman, no matter how long they've been in it, in the industry, out of it, who said, "Hey, you know what? I am crushing my budget. I am crushing all my investments. My legacy plan is set up. My family all knows I'm crushing all areas. I'm all good." I have never been told that even one time by someone,
No.
even off of Wall Street, who's been in this industry for decades. So you're in good
Right.
company if you have more
Yeah.
things to learn and if you're starting. just at a starting point. So I would say gathering an understanding of what you've got. And that may
Mm-hmm.
be all the way back to, I mean, for a widow, somebody who's been in a difficult spot, there's that kind of, I'd call it the freeze, they're kind of stunned. So maybe it's just
Mm-hmm.
the things that are piling up on the dining room table. Just start to have a look at it, get a trusted friend to kind of go through, but understand what you have. That also
Yep.
might be you asking your financial planner, or if you did have an estate planning attorney in the family, those reports are great. I need a pie chart right now. I need you to, understand your own learning style and what's going to work for you. So you may, get this wad of paper and be really discouraged. They can also chart out a trust to help you understand. I mean, if you need to say, I need that in infographic form,
Yeah, because you're a
you know,
visual learner for sure.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So, get started and get what you need to understand what you're working with. And so I think that first step is just to get your arms around what you're working with.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing is to understand who you can trust,
Mm-hmm.
because we get the advice, get a trusted advisor, a trusted friend, maybe a trusted member of the family. And I have a lot of women say, how do I find that advisor? And you're going to have to meet with them. This is something that will take a couple steps. But I
Mm-hmm.
would say, you know, someone you can trust has your best interest at heart, and they will put your needs with your stuff over themselves. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so they're not going to sell you a product that you don't need. And you can ask
Mm-hmm.
questions about those kinds of things. Why do I need this? Do you make a commission on this item? I mean, if we're going to wield all this wealth, we're going to have to know how to ask the hard questions and do deals, right? I mean, this has got what God has
Mm-hmm.
called us up to. Um, Another thing I like to say about figuring out who we can trust is that person okay with the word no? They're telling you to either use something, buy something, do this. I mean, everybody's got an opinion for somebody who's asking what to do with
Sure.
money. If you say, thank you very much, I'm not going to do that right now, I'm going to wait, which Janice had great advice. Don't make any big decisions unless you absolutely must in the first few months. But find out who
Mm-hmm.
those trusted people are. If they're pushy,
Mm-hmm.
if they're on their time frame, if it's their way or the highway, I'd pick highway.
Sure, sure. Yes, because you do hear that, often when the man passes away, one of the first things the woman does is change financial advisors because she often
Yes.
doesn't have the relationship with that person.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. And that goes back to Janice's podcast, which aired toward the end of November. If you're trying to search for it, Janice is the one who's the co-founder of One Degree Advisors, a financial advisory firm here in San Diego. But she talked about, having your essential team around you. And,
Yes.
sometimes I think we put people in our lives like that are super important. Like, let's say it's our hair cutter, or let's say it's our dentist, and our doctor. But we need to look at finances in the same way, as those are essential things, like for our health, that we have these, individuals and relationships that we really like and trust. But the same needs to be true for this area. And it is building that, as Janice mentioned, this essential team of people, and having the great tax advisor that you trust and has, your values at heart, and the, helping you be generous and kingdom minded, and looking for that an investment advisor and the certified financial planner. And sometimes both, that person is one and the same. Sometimes those are two different people. But I think if you're married, it's you and your husband building the team together. If you're single, it's you, writing down these relationships that you feel comfortable with. And whether you're newly single, or newly widowed, it is like, okay, these are my key people. And then as Janice talked about also, it's letting other people know, like if God forbid you got hit by a bus tomorrow, then how would your immediate circle of loved ones know even who those people are? And figuring out just a simple way of sharing those contacts and saying, hey, if something were to happen, these are my people, this is my team.
Yes. And this doesn't happen overnight. You may have to meet with several advisors, either on the certified financial planner or a wealth advisor side financial planner, or on the estate planning side, or other advisors like an accountant. And that's hard, but I would just say take it one step at a time and be working with someone who you're comfortable working with. Part of the statistic you mentioned about it is 70% of women that when they become a widow are changing advisors. And part of that is because he was never talking to her. He was either
Right.
talking to the husband or he was talking
Mhm.
at her. And I cannot tell you how
Mhm.
many times, again and again, that I hear ladies come in and they're a widow, and the planner or the estate planning attorney is just rolling out the program that maybe her husband put in place. Maybe they put it in place together, but more often or not, when they're leaving, they're not on board. They may have never been on
Mhm.
board to begin with, and they just kind of went along to
Mhm.
get along. Um, so that's going to be really important that you find trusted people that are listening to what your goals and
Mhm.
intentions are. And if you intend to be
And your heart.
generous, yeah, that
Mhm.
might cost that advisor something. In fact, it
Mhm.
likely will, because those assets would move out of the control of that advisor eventually into generosity. And it really takes a kingdom minded advisor to be humble and
Mhm.
to enable that, because they are looking out for your best interest and your goals and putting those before theirs.
Mhm. Yes, that's so true. And that just reminds me of like NCF, because if people give, and you've got people that might have a small amount to give, and then you have people that have a lot of resources that they want to give. And sometimes they say, I really want to give those, but I have a great relationship with my investment advisor and I want him to manage the generosity money. And they're able to do
Yes.
that also, which I love,
Yes.
that aspect. Okay, and that reminds me of just the basics of, we've referred to it on numerous podcasts in season one, but talk about when you meet with women in Chicago and you say, do you have an NCF giving fund? What is that? Can you unpack
Yeah.
that for the listener?
Sure. I find a giving fund to be kind of like a charitable checking account. And so I like to break down what we do at NCF in two buckets. We have the donor advised fund, or what we call the giving fund. So that's like the charitable checking account. So we'll talk about that. And then we can also help with complex gifts when someone wants to donate things like real estate or shares of a corporation or those kinds of things. There's a
Mhm.
lot of different things you can donate. A lot of them have great advantages to the kingdom, to saving on taxes. So those are kind of the two buckets of what we can help with. So that giving fund, that charitable checking account, is really you're moving money, or you can donate other things to that account too. So stock, again,
Mhm.
real estate, the complex things you can donate into that fund. It gets a great tax advantage, but then there's a lot of flexibility. You can wait, you get that one receipt, because that fund once a year, you can get receipts as you're giving. But when you're going for your accountant, and I don't know if you've had this
Yes,
experience
I
where you're
have.
scraping along for the 20 receipts of all the different charities that you work with. So the great news is you can have one, and then through that account, you can give to those different charities, your church. You can give anonymously. Sometimes we just want to give something one time, especially during COVID. We saw that where you want to give to something once, but you don't necessarily want to be on their mailing list forever. So people
Sure.
love that anonymous option there. So lots of different options and flexibility with that account, and you can give it out over time. Absolutely. There's just events that happen and you want to get things done within 1 year, but you may not have time to pick all the charities that you'd like to give to. So you want to move that money to the charitable bucket and do that with the right timing. Um, but you may not know, and you want to think about and research more charities and think of a better strategy for your giving. And that gives you the time to do that. And your accountant will be rejoicing.
Very, very true. And what I like is I've had guests on the podcast before that have said they just so look forward to meeting with their investment advisor to find out, how much money they can give. So I do want to encourage the listener, maybe you really haven't exercised the muscle of giving very much in your life.
And this type of a giving fund can be started with very small dollars. So don't listen to this and think, oh, well, I don't have, the thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions to give. Don't worry at all. I mean, think of like the story about the widow's mite, like whatever you have that God's laying on your heart to give, then by doing this and doing it through a giving fund, you'll see how easy it is. And I guarantee most people I encounter who start the exercise and muscle of giving want to give more and end up being more and more generous because it's so fun. And you just feel like you're just this cog in the wheel of, blessing other people. I had one person recently that is that person's gift is tied to an orphanage where the person said they were making rice water. Like the money gave more rice water for these orphans overseas. And I thought, just take my entire bank account, like these poor little children. And if, anything that someone could give to help with more rice water, it's like, oh, I want to give to that kind of thing. I mean, it just pulls at my heartstrings. And we've talked about, in prior podcasts also, the categories of giving. Like you might, as a family, have one area that you're super passionate about, like clean water or anti-trafficking or homelessness. And sometimes people, they involve their children and they want to, exercise the muscle of giving for little ones and help them see the joy of giving. And sometimes it's super strategic, and other times it's more like popcorn, and it's a little here, a little there, and finding a lot of different causes that you want to give towards. So there's definitely no right or wrong answer. And even on our platform, we have like over 91,000 organizations that you can give to. So it's just a simple way, this idea of this charitable checking account, to give to your church and your various organizations that you're passionate about, that you feel God is calling you towards. So, okay, that's perfect. And any other like practical steps that you would encourage the listener here in 2024 to take?
Yeah, well, one of the things I love about what we do is it's not just the mechanisms, it's the community. It's the generous community that we build. So in Chicago, we just had 200 women gather, and it was to hear more about generosity and learn more about all these different options. So they heard from women in private equity and women estate planning attorneys and financial planners and in impact investing. And so these were all Christian women up there talking about these things. So I love that community. I think we learn more, we expand more when we're in community. And I like to think of this as just get on this virtuous cycle of being curious. Let's get rid of fear. Let's get that boldness. And boldness comes from just try it, just learn a little bit. If the verbiage is confusing, ask, what does that mean? What does that word mean? And look it up. And little by little, this comes little by little. And so you increase that learning. I would say don't be afraid, be curious. And that learning and feeling good about, boy, I'm knowing more about this helps be a good steward. You get that boldness to be generous, because generous people are not scared people, right? We get that good sense and peace about, we go from maybe struggling to stable to surplus, and then we get that confidence. Then we really get that generous, virtuous circle of, now we're able to give. Now we're able to be generous. Now we're able to learn more about all the good that's going on out there, and how do we further that? Is that going to be in, giving to nonprofits, our church, Bible translation? Is it going to be making impact investing? Because remember, women are going to be doing deals and owning things, right? So there's just always more and more to learn. And I just think the encouragement and the joy that comes with that, you want to be on that virtuous cycle, and you want to be around friends that are doing it, because we're going to learn from them too.
And as we said with the podcast with Anna Campbell from Indianapolis, we're better together, and we were not meant to go it alone, but by being in community with one another, it's iron sharpens iron, and it encourages each of us then to see a bigger picture of, oh, wow, I didn't even know that was possible. Oh, she's doing that. I want to do that. And I, like you, the learner side of me I love to learn. And I think
Mhm.
the internet is so crazy how there's so much information and knowledge out there, and how you can learn things, so you can just have your own like bachelor's degree education on YouTube alone.
Yes.
So any of these categories, I want to encourage the woman to, like, there's no reason she can't be confident, because the knowledge is out there, the people are out there, and it's just assembling that team, and then just building, like you said, it's almost like a staircase of one step
Yeah.
leads to the next, and the more you have the knowledge, the more confident you will be to take those next steps. So let's you mentioned, just, I always like to touch on the kind of overcoming adversity in this podcast.
Mhm.
And so for you, was it that season when you mentioned just all of a sudden you're fostering three boys, 6, 7, and 8, and you're finding like going to law school part time? I mean, is that your story? Because that sounds amazing. I don't
Yes.
even know how you did it.
This was just kind of a God thing, right? He somehow equips us, because that was also in the process when my dad had ALS at that point.
Mm,
So it was, we had just adopted our three boys, or they were in the process of foster to adoption. I was going back to law school part time. My dad was very sick, but I mean, what the Lord calls us to, He equips us.
mhm,
And so it was a season of adversity, a season of some sadness and hardship, but at the same time, it was so exciting and wonderful. It was, we were always on the great adventure with God.
yeah.
And so I would say some of, we do hit peaks and valleys. Some of this journey has been mountaintop for sure, but I do feel like I did some marine mud crawling through some valleys,
Yes,
and
as we
I
all
learned
have.
from those. Yeah, I learned from those. You
Mhm,
learn what we can rely on the Lord, what He will equip us to do, that we can handle more
mhm.
when we're going to lean on Him. So, and just to do things. You're never ready to adopt three children within 1 year. It's just like people say, "Are you ever ready for children?" Not really. You just kind of jump in that pool and hope there's water in it, right? Um, so, I mean, that's a neat season. It was a sweet season, and we can really learn. And in the moment, it is about survival. I would say there were definitely days that were about survival, but if you live long enough, you'll be able to look back. And when you hit your next season of adversity, you'll kind of recall, I've been through some tough things before, and some real gold came out of it. That's where we get that refining, right? We
Mhm,
become
mhm.
more pure gold, and the dross gets fired off. It's sure painful in the process, but love what comes out of that process if we just be on the great adventure with God.
I love that, Valerie. And I just like to look at it as the long game. I think sometimes it's easy to be tempted to throw in the towel because it does feel too hard. But
Yes.
if the listener listening can just be patient, and to know that this too will pass, and that he does equip each of us for whatever he's called us to. And everyone's life looks different. It doesn't help to look to the left or the right, because that woman's situation is quite different than mine. And just stay focused on the path that God's put me on, knowing that it is a long path. And right now it might be a valley, but that mountaintop, experience is coming. So, oh, I just love, that's wonderful. And I love the ministry you're doing with your mom. Are there any, I know you'll have these in the show notes, but any other websites, or
Yeah.
even if the listener wanted to hear the radio program, where you direct them?
Yeah, they can look at wisewomenmanagingmoney.com. It's a website, it's a 1 minute radio feature. It's all been kind of rolled into that now. It's a book. They can look at our NCF giving website for generosity tips and a generosity strategy. So, all kinds of great resources out there if we're curious, right?
Right, right. Okay, and then I always like to make sure that I wrap up with the guest sharing her favorite Bible verse and the current book she's
Okay.
reading, and then a recent bargain.
Okay. I've always had kind of my life verses Romans 12:1 and 2. And I just love how it's talking about I can read it or share it. It says, appeal to you, therefore, brothers, and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a holy, living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing, you'll discern what is the will of God and what is acceptable and perfect. I love just the talking about don't be transformed to the world. There's nothing there for us, right? Um, we come into this world with nothing, we leave with nothing. All of the good stuff is eternal, and so we really want to focus
Mm-hmm.
on that and to let our minds be transformed. It's to be on the great adventure with God and let him transform our mind to where he would like it to
Mm-hmm.
be. And when we're not of this world and we're more about eternal things and we are about caring about the things that God cares about, it is the great adventure. And I just love that. That really ties into the learning and curiosity piece to have our mind be transformed.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting because I've referenced this large women's study that I was a part of.
Yes.
Myself and four other women were the teaching leaders for it. We called it the Journey. And we had the hiking boot in the middle of every table and encouraging women to take that next step. But that was our verse for the journey, was just what you're referencing, Romans 12, 1 and 2. And that changing, of one's mind and not being conformed to the world is a process that is circumstances happen to us, but how do we respond? Do we memorize scripture to dwell on the word of God and not what we're reading, on the internet, but are we allowing our mind to see things as he wants us to see things? And the encouraging part is you can, look back and you can go, wow, look where I was there and how I thought about things, and look the things that he's brought me through and now how I see things and the hope that I have because I know of his faithfulness.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so what is a current book that you're reading?
I'm always reading a bunch, so I listen to audiobooks all the time. So I'm trying for a book a week, but I'm going to try to narrow down to two.
Wow.
I really like The Compound Effect that I'm listening to right now and reading. And it's very similar to the book Atomic Habits. But as we were talking about just taking the next right step or doing small steps, that book Atomic Habits is not atomic meaning explosive, it means tiny, right? And so
Right.
the same with this compound effect. And like you were saying, my pastor likes to say, it's all about long obedience in the same direction. And so this is
Oh,
talking
that's
about
good.
keep on, keep going. It is that long game. We just want to keep on doing the next right thing. And that gets legs after a while. I like to say, if you live long
Uh-huh.
enough, God will do something with that. So I like that. Yeah.
That's great. That's really good. Is that book by the same author as Atomic
I
Habits?
know it's Darren Hardy, and they're not necessarily Christian books, but there's just a lot of good nuggets in there.
Mhm. Yes, I read Atomic Habits and have that book as well.
Yeah.
And I like you said, it's the baby steps that we take, and
Yes.
over time, the huge cumulative effect that they have. Okay, and last but not least, your favorite recent bargain.
Oh, so this is kind of funny. I have a show and tell. So if you're listening, you might have to go to the website to look. But anyway, I had this purse and I loved it, love it. And I'm I am a reformed shopper, so we downsized our home about 2 years ago, and I would just have to say, with the accumulation and the stuff, I've done it. I'm over it. I'm, but I have
Less
this
is
purse.
more.
Less is so much more. But I have this purse, and I loved it to death. But yeah, I took it so long, it became kind of ratty. So this is my fun little purse. But as you can see, if you're looking, this started really getting ratty. The wires are poking out of it and everything. And, my husband's like, yeah, we're all about the frugality, Val, but that's a bit much. So when he says it's time, it's really time. So
It's
I put another one in my Amazon cart, but I like to tell people my favorite budgeting hack, one of many. besides just contentment in general, is put it in the cart and just wait, because so often the desire for that thing will come and go, right? But this one dropped significantly in price. So it is the same model. So this is, I couldn't find that same color, but anyway, and I think it went from like maybe $150 to maybe 110 or something like that. But
Nice.
and you know, on a purse you can spend 15 and you can spend 30 grand. So this was my bargain.
Right.
I will likely stretch that out for another 10 years if it lasts.
You got to have a good purse because we use it every day. I recently bought my mom, who's in her 80s, one of those like Lululemon fanny packs, because she's balancing her purse on her shoulder. I'm like, Mom, you just got to clip it around your waist and you'll have both hands free. So yes, she was excited. So, well, Valerie, you're just amazing. Honestly, I love your story. I love your commitment to being such a learner along with your mom, the lives that you both have touched and impacted. And I'm excited to see in 2024 what you all do in Chicagoland with NCF. And I do want to encourage the listener, look up NCF in your area and join the women's community, because it is powerful and we are better together, and we do sharpen one another. So I don't want you to miss out and feel like you're alone and you're listening to this podcast, because there are NCF communities all over. So thank you, Valerie, for sharing your wisdom. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.